This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. We are here in the studio continuing on our series of shows here recently where we've been talking about things like innovation leadership, skill sets. Most recently, we talked about the brain and how do you exercise and actually increase that muscle that you can apply to innovation and creativity. This week, we're going to continue on in those discussions, and that is around decision making. Now, this entire series has been based off of a series of questions, requests, emails that I've received from listeners like you. And this one deals directly with decision making. The question I got was, hey, I'm trying to create a new innovation team, or I'm heading up innovation within my organization, or I want to pitch to my boss to create an innovation team, and I want to go lead that team. But we're up against this challenge in our organization where the decision-making process is so slow. So if I'm trying to drive a pace of innovation through the organization, how do I get an organization to pick up its pace of decision-making? The fact that it can make rapid, but not just fast, but also accurate decisions. Anybody can make fast decisions. You can just make a decision and go. But is there a framework to think about decisions that allows you to pick up the pace, do them faster, and then at the same time, though, actually make them more accurate? Well, fortunately, there is. There's a fairly common approach that's actually used in the military called OODA Loops. And OODA stands for the Observe, Orient, Decide, and Act. So OODA, Observe, Orient, Decide, and Act. And the OODA Loop came about because of the military. How do you train military leaders or pilots when they're in a stressful situation not to fall into rote thinking? How do they observe and look, and how do they apply creativity to solve a problem, get themselves out of a jam, win, whatever the ultimate goal is, right? Not get caught in just doing it the same thing the same way, because guess what? Your competition or your enemy is going to have analyzed you, and when they see you take certain actions or think a certain way, that allows and opens up the door for them to win against you. So the OODA Loop actually encourages you to look and evaluate a variety of things and test them and act on them, and then based on that result, go back through the OODA Loop again until you can get to a solution that either solves your problem or you win the battle or whatever it is. And that's why it's called a loop. It doesn't stop. You don't run through it once and stop. You continuously run it through over and over and over again. First up, though, is observe, right? You have to collect data. You've got to collect information. Now, some of that may come from, hard data that you get, customer surveys and feedbacks and calls into your call center, sales numbers, competitors, sales information, whatever it is, you can get the hard data. But you also have to get broader information. Information is not just data, but information can be gathered from observation, watching customers or watching the competition. Or if you're a fighter pilot, your observation is you're collecting all the information off of your instruments in the plane, and you're collecting the information that you can see with your eyes outside your plane to know cloud cover, where the enemy is at, etc. So observe is you're rapidly trying to gather up as much information accurately, making sure that you're not biased and you're not using one piece of data in order to justify an action, but instead using as much data as accurately as you can gather in the shortest period of time, such that you can get yourself the most accurate view with what you have. Now, keep in mind, you will never, ever, ever have complete information. It just doesn't happen. So you're only going to have whatever information and data you can have. And a lot of people and organizations and leaders, in fact, get hung up waiting for that one last piece of data before they'll make a decision. If you're in a jet plane and you've got 30 seconds to win this face off with somebody, you don't have chance to let 20 PhDs go look up some data for you. You have to use the information you have, make as accurate an assessment of that information, and use that as the first stage in your OODA loop. Okay, so first off is this observation, and that is it becomes really critically important. The other is the next one is Orient. Now Orient is an interesting thing, and that is it's actually one that typically gets overlooked. And the Orient is really around trying to identify the barriers to your decision making. And really what it's about is recognizing any biases that you have, right? So biases on traditions, the way we've always done it this way. We've always, if I'm in a fighter pilot and I'm in a plane and I have someone confront me, I always, swoop to the right. Well, guess what? If you do that every time, the competition will see that. So in the case of that is you get caught in tradition. You're always doing things the exact same way, which your competitors will know, and they can predict that, and they can create an action that causes you to win. The other is confirmation bias. You look for a piece of data that tells you that you can rely on something that worked for you the last time, right? So I have 20 pieces of data, but that one piece of data is signaling to me that last time that piece of data showed up and I did this result happened. And that is a confirmation bias. And you have to be careful of confirmation bias. It can be, quite deadly. The other is just overflow of information, right? And so then you go through the whole process of radical simplification, where you just pick out one or two elements. You got to be able to sift through just the sheer volume of data in order to figure out what it is you're looking at. So this is all part of Orient, or orientating yourself to the information you have, the context of everything you have, and being able to recognize what those biases really are. And so, just from the standpoint of that whole Orient, it's like I said, it's a tough one to try to describe, and I'm probably not doing the best job in describing it. But it is about identifying those barriers and recognizing those barriers and including that in to all the information that's coming in. And that is, again, part of the whole process of the OODA loop, why it's called a loop, right? So you observe, you orient, decide, you act, and then based on that action, you observe, orient, decide, and act again. And then based on that action, you observe, orient, decide, and act. And you continue to do the OODA loop over and over and over again until you get to a solution to whatever the opportunity or the problem is. So in the case of a pilot, they may go through an OODA loop, take an action, and then based on now the information they have, the result of that action that they just took, they'll do that, observe that action, and then they'll do the orient, they'll make another decision, they'll act on it, and they just continue to do the loop over and over and over again. And like I said, this came out of the military, and it became pretty applicable. In fact, one of the examples of the Orient is also your ability to take information and put it together in unique and different ways. And the one example in this case that they use when they train this in the military is about what they call building snowmobiles. Are you somebody that can build snowmobiles? Now, what they really mean is, can you not physically do that? But if you look at a snowmobile, it's mainly a Frankenstein device. It's treads from a tractor. It's an engine from an outboard motor. It's handlebars from a bicycle slapped together to go solve a specific problem. In the case of Orient, is taking all that data, understanding your biases, putting it together in unique and different ways, that actually gives you another option when we go and we talk about decisions, which is the D of the OODA loop. So again, this Orient is your ability to now synthesize that data, recognize all that information that you got in the observe, synthesize it, assemble it in a unique and different way. Can you build a snowmobile out of the data you've got? Meaning, create a Frankenstein if needed be to create a solution to the problem you're faced. And then we get to a decision, which is actually the D coming up next. So don't go anywhere. We're talking about faster, more accurate decision making, specifically using OODA Loop as a methodology. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're talking about how to make faster and more accurate decisions when it comes to your innovation efforts. A lot of organizations get caught up in processes and hierarchies for making decisions. One methodology that I like to use, and I've used it in a number of projects and teams, is again this OODA Loop, which comes from the military. And OODA stands for Observe, Orient, Decide, and Act. Now, we've already talked about observe and orient. So observe, collect up as much information to get an accurate sense of what the current situation is. Orient is understanding your biases. Don't automatically jump to an action based on historical, but is to orient, take the data and synthesize it such that you can consume it and use it as a tool for decision making. And that includes assembling data in unique and different ways. And we talked in the last segment about building snowmobiles. In this segment, we're talking about two things: decide and act. So the decision is, now that you've gathered the information and you're orientated yourself, is now making the informed decision. Now, the two previous steps, all that information and all that orientation, will give you just an absolute plethora of ideas. So at this point, you need to choose the most relevant option. Now, you have to be cautious about what the military refers to as first conclusion bias. And that is you just can't make the same decision over and over again. So as I said, OODA is a loop. You're going to do it. You're going to do the observe, orientate, decide, and act. And then based on that action, you're going to do it again. Well, if you get to the decision and you keep making that first bias, that first decision over and over and over again, do you really expect the output to be any different? Isn't there like an old Einstein quote, something about if you do the same approach or same decision and you expect the same outcome, isn't that or different outcome? That's a sign of insanity. That's what we're talking about here. So as you run through the loop, if your decision is always the same answer and you haven't solved the problem, then maybe that's not the right decision. So you got to be careful of what we call first conclusion biased. And at some point, you need to test the decisions that you've made at this point through the loop. And that is, you use the data, you've made a decision, you've taken action, now you've observed it again. Then you need to be able to figure out where the flaw was in the last decision. As you're going through the loop again, what's the flaw in that last decision that didn't solve the problem? It didn't cause the fighter pilot to win the battle. It didn't cause you to win, in the marketplace. What was that decision and what was the flaw in that decision? And then feed that into the overall the OODA loop. And then again, including that in the continuous loop. So every time you're going through the loop, every action is actually should be feeding data back in. So when you observe it, said, we're going to go to the right. Nope, that was the wrong direction. So now you go back through and observe it and orientate it. You now make a new decision. And now you say, well, I went to the right. That didn't work out too well. But partway down, it was an interesting direction we could have taken. So let's go this way, but not to the right, but maybe a little bit off center. And then you use that data and continuously feed that back in from the standpoint of making the OODA loop better, shortening the number of times you need to go through the loop in order to get to a decision. But again, this is all based on the pace. You can't wait for perfect data. You're never going to have perfect contacts. You can't orientate yourself perfectly. You're never going to make the perfect decision because there's multiple options. So it's about making the decisions and then acting on them. And that's where the A comes from in the OODA loop. It's really about acting upon those rational decisions and doing that quickly, doing that in such a way that you can test, you can experiment, you can see if this is going to lead towards a good direction. And then if it does, then you reinforce it, you do more of that. So again, the whole objective here is how do you make faster, more accurate decisions? Fast is you never stay in any stage in the OODA loop for any length of time. You're cycling through it at a very, very, very fast pace. But you're making more accurate decisions because you're using the output of an action that you just did to be input into the next round of the loop. So you're constantly improving the decision making as you go through it. So it's actually in the best interest is to go through as quickly as many cycles of the OODA loop, because it literally is a feedback mechanism into the overall decision making. And so therefore, but the key here is you got to do something. You have to act. You just cannot, sit back and wait. You can't do the mental exercise. In the innovation game, that act could be putting out a little prototype or presenting the concept of a product, right? And then based on the feedback you get from users, you get all your data, you collect that, you observe, you orientate, you make another decision, and you act on it. The same thing, right? So you just continue to do the OODA loop over and over and over again. Now, why is it that I like the OODA loop? Particularly, I like it within project teams, because it forces the team to continuously do something, move the ball down the court, and not get frozen. There comes a stage in every innovation project, every product, that where the whole team just kind of locks up and freezes because they get caught in an inability to make a decision, to actually go do something. There may be disagreement among the team. They may be waiting for perfect information. Thousands of reasons why. But I've seen it literally, if not 100%, let's say 90% of every innovation project, every product I've ever built and launched, where the team gets locked. They get frozen. They can't move. And I step in, and you step in simply saying, okay, let's run the OODA loop. Let's observe. What's our orientation? Let's make a decision. Let's act. Now let's go back and let's observe. Did that action move us down the court? Did it solve a problem? And then you just drive it through the OODA loop. So the team, rather than getting caught on the one decision, they get driven to test or validate through the action and then move forward. One of the things that teams, look, I don't like it either, right? If I had my choice, I'd have perfect data for every decision I've ever made. But I learned early in my career, that ain't happening. Nobody has perfect data, and you have to be comfortable with ambiguity, with uncertainty. And that's where the OODA loop actually helps, because you're driving to the decision based on whatever you've observed. You don't have perfect data. Make the decision based on what you've observed and you've orientated. Make a decision and then act on it. But then every time you act, that adds another piece of data into the observe. So you're improving your ability to observe, which allows you to actually build the data to get to the perfect decision, which you'll never get to. So don't think you're going to run the OODA loop 10,000 times and get to a perfect decision. Doesn't happen. Okay? So we're going to take another quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to talk specifically about why the OODA loop works. I've shared that a little bit with you, but we'll continue on that conversation as we go into the next segment. Don't go anywhere, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. We're talking today about how do you pick up the pace of decision making, but also can you have accurate decisions while going fast. And this is the deal with a lot of organizations. They kind of get caught up into a very slow decision-making process where you have to get, your manager's permission, and then they have to go to their director, and then they got to go to their VP, and then they got to go to the senior VP, and then ultimately some decisions get thrown off to the CEO. If organizations would embrace some form of decision-making methodology like OODA, what we're talking about today, doing OODA loops, then you can actually empower people way down in the organization to make decisions. Because as a team, if they're looking at and they're doing good observation and they're doing good orientation, assembling that data into such a way that you can make a decision, then making a decision, and then doing an action against it, and then using the output of that action as an input for an observation, and then you loop it and you continuously loop it, you actually will not only pick up the pace, but you will also pick up the accuracy. And also, as teams get better at observation and orienting the data and the information that they've gathered, teams will become pretty good and pretty quick at running OODA loops in order to, again, increase the pace and increase the accuracy. But what I want to talk about in this segment is specifically about giving you some context of why the OODA loops work. Why is this an approach that the military uses, and a number of companies around the world use this as part of one of many decision-making tools that can be used. But let's think about it. OODA loops came out of the military primarily as a way for fighter pilots, because when they were in a dogfight or a battle, they would get this tunnel vision and would forget to look at certain information and gather it and make bad decisions. So they're trained when they get into a high-stress situation and where a decision needs to be made, and it needs to be made quickly, to run the OODA loop. Observe, orientate, decide, act. Observe, orientate, decide, act. And so by running through the OODA loop, it forces them to kind of step back, don't get caught in tunnel vision, don't get caught just doing it the rote way you do it, because there may be some observation you make that may be additional input that would cause you to make maybe a decision that you'll go try something because of something's different, and that decision may be the thing that is between life and death. And so, and in fact, in the case of pilots, good pilots will actually cycle through an OODA loop in literally seconds, not minutes, not hours, days, weeks, months, literally seconds. And a good team in any kind of an industry should be able to run an OODA loop in a team and get to the action part within minutes, maybe a few hours. Something that's really hairy and has impact on life or death, you make it either faster or longer, whatever is appropriate. But the point here is you don't get caught in any one phase for, okay, we need a year to go do the observe. The wrong answer. The question is what data do you have now? If you don't have perfect data, what data do you have now? Meaning you get an hour to go through and analyze that data and synthesize that for whatever the target is for solving for the OODA. So speed, and this is what was really the basis for the pilots. And even in today's digital world, right? If you think about, the black hat hackers that are trying to break into corporate systems, they will literally change their techniques every day, every week. Growth hackers, which are these consultants that will actually come alongside and help small businesses, get it to explosive growth for their business. Growth hackers will change. They'll run OODA loops every hour and try something new. And if that doesn't work, test it, put it out there, see what action happened. Did that drive more sales to Amazon? If not, run the OODA loop, try another experiment. And so the pace of an OODA loop is not, like I said, if it goes more than days, then you're not really running an OODA loop. You should be doing it in hours, maybe days, maybe weeks. I'm trying to think of it, a case. I've never had a case that has gone that long where I've had. Now, the action may take you longer to implement. You get through the observe, orientate, decide, and the action may take you longer. But you don't get caught up in analyzing it. You don't get caught up in orientating to the information you've got. You don't pause on the decision. You want to get to that action. The action is actually key. Also, running a process like an OODA loop gives permission to the team to be comfortable with uncertainty. You acknowledge up front you don't have perfect data. You will never, ever have perfect data. So why delay a decision waiting for something that you're never, ever going to have? So putting a more formal process like an OODA loop in actually gives the teams permission to get comfortable with uncertainty. And uncertainty is one of those funny things, right? Because it's about the fact that it's what you don't know, right? It is that uncertainty. I'm making a decision without knowing 100% all of the pros and cons. We need to get comfortable with that. Another area of why OODA loops work out so well is dealing with unpredictability, right? Everybody would love to be able to sit down and get to the decision and then analyze the decision out as accurate as possible before you actually make the action, before you actually do anything. And that's a problem, right? You're never going to be able to have a perfect accuracy, right? Look, I love people or teams and organizations who make their innovation teams do these ungodly, Excel spreadsheets with 25 tables in it, all interlinked, to try to prove the value of an idea before they're going to pull the trigger and take the action of actually doing something. And guess what? I have no confidence in those spreadsheets. Look, I'm as good as anybody at making a spreadsheet say whatever it is I want to say. So should not be part of that whole decision-making process, right? It's about doing something, making an action, and going out and trying something, and then seeing if it works, and then if so, do more of it. If it doesn't work, put that information back into the top of the OODA loop, and off you go, starting all over again to look at observe and orientate, make a decision, and then make a decision to act. Now, one of the nice outputs of an OODA loop is when you pick up your pace and you truly are being highly flexible and you're building, what the military would call lots of snowmobiles. You're putting data together in very unique ways to create approaches. In the military, it's plans of actions that the enemy can't predict because you're trying things all over the place. The same thing happens in your innovation teams. If you're trying a variety of different things, your competition's kind of going, whoa, where are these guys going? They've got all these experiments. I can't get my bearings as to what is their direction so that I can counteract it. So if you're truly driving an OODA loop where you've got orientation of assembling this data in unique and different ways, where you're creating snowmobiles, then your output will be very confusing to your competition. And in my mind, that is a great thing. The other benefit for OODA is testing. It's all orientated on testing, right? So you make a decision saying, okay, we've observed this, I've got this context, we're going to make a decision and we're going to structure an action that allows us to test this hypothesis, and then use the output from that test as another loop through the OODA, right? So it's not about doing an OODA loop where you're going to make the one decision and then sit back and you're done. As I've said before, you're running multiple OODA loops as fast as you can in order to get that test and get that test data in. So hopefully you found this useful, giving you a little bit of insight into one of the decision-making tools that I teach and will share with teams, depending on if they get caught in that, where they're stuck and they can't make a decision, then showing them how to use an OODA loop. I've never used an OODA loop throughout an entire organization. I typically put it on to, introduce certain teams when they get stuck, but maybe that would be something to think about. Could you apply this decision-making process to larger teams or maybe even entire organizations? Because it gives you a framework for conversation of observe, orientate, decide, act, driven by action. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back. We're going into segment 4 and another episode of 5 Minutes to New Ideas. This segment of the show I call 5 Minutes to New Ideas. Designed for the creative mind looking for that next great idea. Each episode will challenge you to think differently about yourself and your business by asking unique, funny, and sometimes crazy questions. Get your notebook out and be ready to uncover that game-changing idea. Here is 5 minutes to new ideas. I don't know how the business world is going to evolve. All I know for sure is that it's going to evolve, and that the pace of this evolution is going to get faster than we can even imagine today. Think about the music and ask yourself, what's a song? What should a music fan expect to experience